Thanks for staying with us, and we carry on with our discussion on the crisis that is the cost of living today. And I've seen you're sending in your feedback. 2242 is the SMS line, hashtag Monday Report. Let's start with a few tweets, please. All right, this is what your sentiments are. Omar Ogutu, you're saying fiscal policy and government spending is basically a political process. How do you then balance that with monetary policy, which is largely a professionally run process? I'd want to know that from the panel, and we'll get one of them to respond to that. Omar, thank you. Robert Kiberenge, you said the government should urgently formulate an elaborate stimulus package to cushion ordinary people, suspend mega projects, invest in subsidies, pump more resources into Kazi Mtaani. Okay, Robert, that's an interesting proposal. Kevo Wood Adori, you say the high cost of living is proving to be a very hard nut to crack. The hustler and Azimio bravado should stop as we solve this stalemate. Okay. Dennis Munene, ask the panelists, which country in Africa has gotten it right in addressing the global economic crisis? What can we learn from them? Okay, and via SMS line, Kilonzo says, Wahiga, you need to invite these panelists every weekday to educate Kenyans on economic issues. Okay, they're busy. I don't know if they have time. Somebody says here, let me see. Okay, it's more feedback. I'm looking for questions. Okay, somebody says bananas is a staple food in parts of Uganda, not the whole country. While another person here, no name, you say the next government should prioritize agriculture, made in Kenya policies, water, access for Kenyans, and healthcare access for all. That's what they feel should be a priority. Dr. McPhee, I'll come back to you. Wanjiro, let me jump straight over to you. We have 42 days to the poll, so we can't run away. I said politics aside, but it will come back in. Okwa Uchumi has had a chance to meet both Azimio and Kenya Kwanza. I don't know if you're going to meet the other two candidates as well. But on the back of that, with the front runners both having manifestos that have proposals that could potentially lead to more spending on sort of what their pet priorities are, some question whether this means that the cost of living is going to go higher to fund some of these projects. Are these questions, you asked these candidates, you met Deputy President William Ruto, you met Raila Odinga. What were some of the questions that you posed to them?
We met Martha Karua for Azimio, and we met the Deputy President. We raised governance issues, and the governance issues we raised was, number one, we raised the leadership question, because our reading of it as Okoa Uchumi is we have a very progressive constitution. Yet, under that very progressive constitution, government managed to take an almost balanced budget and run us into an economic crisis through irresponsible, excessive spending, or rather irresponsible borrowing, spending on non-priority projects or non-productive projects. And so we say that the economic crisis we have, and yes, there are structural issues. We have low productivity in agriculture. We have high cost of inputs. Those are real problems we've had that government needed to prioritize and deal with. But instead of dealing with those issues, what government did is borrow, put money in energy and infrastructure projects, some of which, you know, the viability or the sustainability or the returns have been questioned and have driven us to a situation where 70 out of every 100 shillings we collect in revenue through our taxation, 70 is going back to pay debt. So, one of the questions we asked both sides is, where is the money? You do not have the fiscal space, number one. We also said government needs to come clean and accept we have a problem. And to resolve that problem, we need to change, we need to reprioritize our spending. Now, what has happened with the Jubilee administration and the lesson for the incoming administration is you can't do everything. You must spend on productive areas where people are employed, and I agree, agriculture. Now, this is a priority. We are waiting for the Kenya Kwanza manifesto. We've seen the Azimio.
Later this week.
Right. Azimio has prioritized agriculture. They've prioritized, in fact, they've got a very good plan, link agriculture to manufacturing, link it to the informal trade, link it to international diplomacy to address the issues that Dr. McPhee is saying in terms of, yeah, you need to protect our farmers to some extent, but you also want to be a good global neighbor. Now, the problem is, plans are great. Governance is about leadership, is about tough decisions, is about accountability. So the point we stress is this has to be prioritized because you need people who walk the talk. We also note that there is a strong emphasis on social protection, including the 6,000, including the universal health care promises. These are great promises if you deal with the governance and also if you rationalize waste. So one of the key messages we were saying is budgeted corruption has undone the Kenya's economy, and the antidote to budgeted corruption is accountability. In our view, some of those spending priorities need to be relooked at, and the Azimio manifesto talks about renegotiating debt, reprofiling the debt so that you have discussions.
Our lenders have received that news with
exactly.
I see challenges.
There's a challenge. There's a challenge with commercial borrowing and such. But the other thing is we need public participation because public finance, and especially with debt procurement, has been treated as though it's the purview of just politicians, treasury and politicians, and the international financial institutions, to the exclusion of the citizens who are overtaxed. The other thing, we need tax justice. Right now, the poor, the lower income, and we can say to an extent the middle class employed are the ones bearing the burden of taxation. There's a whole bracket of wealthy institutions and individuals and international organizations that are not paying their due share. There's also a lot of seepages by way of accountability in the tax.
And so these were some of the
some of the issues we raised.
Let me allow Dr. Mulu to also come in. Dr. Mulu, did the 12th Parliament do everything to protect Kenyans? I mean, no one could have predicted Ukraine war, COVID-19 and the disruption brought about, but did it do enough? And some are saying, even now, can it do something with the remaining 40 days or so? And I know Senator is on, but...
I think the remaining 40 days, you can't do anything. Parliament is on recess, and I don't see it being recalled till after the elections. So what I would say is Kenyan Parliament, just the 12th Parliament, just like any other Parliament, they have had their strengths and they have had their weak points. What we call the lowest point and the high points. And what I would say is, because I also served in the 11th Parliament, I've had a chance of comparing the two. I can tell you for sure 11th Parliament performed better than the 12th Parliament. Basically because what would happen is, you know, Waiga, what happens is, at the end of the day, what Parliament does, most of the time, we actually deal with executive agenda, either in form of bills, in form of budgets, and based on what the priorities of the executive are, then you find that Parliament would be, to a large extent, be guided towards that direction. So what has happened is, when you look at what has happened, the issues of budget, I think in terms of budget processing, Parliament has tried their best, more so, based on the advice of the Parliamentary Budget Office. But there are some areas where we have not done very well, and more so where we have ignored the advice, the technical advice. And I can tell you for sure, there are many times, because I sit in that committee, we've gone against the advice of the Parliamentary Budget Office. And as a result of that, the consequences would come a year later, or, for example, the issue of the public debt ceiling. We were advised accordingly that don't revise this figure to make it a specific figure other than a percentage.
So we should hold you responsible?
We did our best. But what I'm saying is, as I say, I'm included because if you look at the voting pattern, you will realize that I might have voted no, but the majority did their way, as we said earlier. So the thing is, if you go to the answer, it will always, some of us who have been consistent, more informed by the fact that our background is also in economics, where we appreciate most of the issues we are discussing here. For example, the issue of agriculture. It's a very clear issue. Why, if you do a trend analysis, and I'm sure my colleagues will appreciate, anytime agricultural sector has done well in this country, the economy has grown. More jobs have been created. So we are saying, if you want really to unlock some of the crisis, the economic crisis in this country, just unlock agriculture, put more resources, support subsidies in terms of input, so that when agriculture does well, the rest of the sectors will follow suit, and you see the economy does well. The issue of monetary and fiscal policy. You know, monetary policy is more of a central bank kind of mandate. Central bank is so keen on monetary policy, that's why you see they have that council. The fiscal policy is more of a treasury mandate. But you know, treasury is where politics is played. Central bank, there isn't much politics. So where politics come into play is where you see most things not going as per expectation. And I think really, as we move to the future, it will be important for some of us who are politicians to really start having a structured way of doing things as a politicians. And we respect more the technical advice coming from our technocrats. One of the reasons why Kibaki government did so well is because he was a good listener, and more so, things which are well crafted by the technocrats. Because Kibaki would just ask you to justify your proposal. And if you give a proper justification, anytime we ask those who worked with him, he will tell you, Kibaki will just tell you, okay, tell me what you want to be done. He will take him through the process. If he's confused, he says, you go on. And he gives you the mandate to implement 100%. Unlike some of us who will be given advice, and you see you are being told by somebody who is an expert that if you do this, the results will be this one. And then you ignore that advice. But at the end of the day, some of us, I said, are consultants that we are used. You give your advice or your opinion. If it is taken on board, thank you. If it is not taken, you just keep quiet and watch.
Dr. McPhee, I want you to respond to two of the SMSs there. One asked about, is there any country in Africa that's responded to the economic crisis in a good way, in a proper way, with the advice of technocrats? Are there any examples out there? And secondly, another viewer asked for a stimulus package. And some would say, we've been getting stimulus packages, government subsidies on fertilizer, the fuel stabilization mechanism, and yet we're here today. Is a stimulus package what Kenyans need right now?
Well, you know, you could obviously take some of the oil-producing countries. Cape Verde, for example, is a very small island. The people are very poor there, but the head of the Cape Verde is a very, very rich man. And he, in fact, could make life very easy for that particular country. But the fact is that no country in the world is successfully overcoming this inflation at the moment. It's happening everywhere in the world. So I would say that, you know, people in Kenya are complaining about things, and, you know, fuel, as I say, is 3 times what it was. A barrel of oil is 3 times what it was 2 years ago. But also, you've got to factor in that 9% increase in the value of the dollar. But you see another factor which, you know, the biggest source of foreign exchange in Kenya is our diaspora. The people working outside of Kenya, the people who've been educated in Kenya, and very often there isn't a job big enough for them to do it here. So they're even working in Tesla, they're working in all sorts of, you know, highly successful enterprises abroad. They sent last year $3.7 billion, not pound, not Kenya shillings, $3.7 billion to Kenya. Now, you've also got to keep in mind that in the year 2019, tourism injected 164 billion shillings into our economy. In the year 2019, we had just over 2 million tourists. In fact, the precise number, the problem is that when you look at different sources, the World Bank will give you one number, the National Bureau of Statistics will give you another. But basically, it was 2.05 million people. Now, we had our crisis with COVID on the 13th of March, 2020. In the month of April 2020, we had nine tourists in Kenya.
Single digit.
A single digit. So I think it's very important to keep that in mind, because what happens, you know, you've got to remember that the mama mbogas will actually produce vegetables which are going to be consumed by those 2 million people. They're people with a certain amount of money, all right? So they're going to consume everything. Even East African breweries, if you remember, came down that year. Now, the position here, okay, is that tourism is coming back, but it's going to take a little bit of time. I was talking to someone down in Mombasa at White Sands. He said, well, we got a lot of local tourists. We have not got international tourists yet. Now, speaking about that, you know, many of us are saying, well, all this infrastructure is just a waste of time. You know, we have to keep in mind that, you know, tourists will come to a country where you can drive successfully from here to the Masai Mara without almost getting your car broken in two. The repairs for Moi International Airport down in Mombasa was 9 billion shillings. It was deteriorated to such an extent that it had cost 9 billion shillings to repair it. Now, that may be overstated, but I think it's important here to keep in mind that when I come out of the airport in Mombasa, let's say from Poland, from wherever it is, Italy, France, etc., if I can drive comfortably to my hotel in Mombasa, it's going to be an enormous advantage over what was there previously. You have guys, you know, almost to get to Mtwapa, okay, was an incredible burden. So I think it's important here not to exaggerate that, you know, we have to have a country where there is infrastructure. It costs a lot of money. You know, I know someone who's a managing director of a company which works up an upper hill. Now,
and I suspect Manzir wants to respond to you on that one, but let me let you finish.
You know, but he says, look, the expressway for him is fantastic. And I've heard many other people say the same thing. If you can drive from the airport in Kigali to the financial center there in half an hour, and it's going to take you 3 hours to do it in Nairobi, where am I going to do my finance?
Okay.
In Kigali and not in Nairobi.
And not in Nairobi, okay.
Right.
She really wants to jump. Go
now,
ahead.
You know, yes, we need infrastructure. No one argues with that. But the point is, which priorities, at what cost, and has corruption been factored in? When you have high-level infrastructure projects that have corruption in them, you know, for instance, the SGR was inflated by around 40%. And then you consider the amount it cost to acquire the land across, you know, the interests around that. Then you look at how much did we borrow with corruption driven into that, and what's the impact of that repayment? What if we had rehabilitated the existing line like we were advised to do by the World Bank? So the point is, the World Bank, civil society assessed and said, we do not need a standard gauge railway at this point because we don't even have the volume of freight to pay off the cost of doing the SGR. The recommendation was to rehabilitate. So the tenderpreneurs or the kleptocracy or whoever you call them picked a project out of Vision 2030 and said, let's inflate it. Because if you implement it as it is, it's not going to make us any money. What is the opportunity cost that we are then paying? Apart from, you know, remember SGR was an appropriation in aid. So that money never even came into Kenya. We are paying for jobs we created in China, unfortunately. What's the opportunity cost? The investments in agriculture have been going down. Where 70% of Kenyans are employed, government isn't putting money there. They're putting money, exporting our money and our jobs to China. So the wrong project at the wrong price for the wrong reason at the expense of the majority of Kenyans. So the point we are saying is we recognize we're in a global situation with, we had the COVID and now we've got the war in Ukraine. But the vulnerability in Kenya is because of budgeted corruption of the Jubilee administration that continued. Even during COVID, by the way, the government made a rationale saying that we are going to continue spending in high-impact projects, which is a lie, because those projects are not high impact. Those projects are not creating jobs. They are not putting money in the economy because of the inefficiencies built in them. What this administration should have done is scale back these high-level projects, increase the cushion that you give to Kenyans, ensure you put money in agriculture. In fact, agriculture was the most resilient of the sectors in 2020. That's what actually sustained our GDP at some level.
Because of the rain.
Yeah, so put money where people are employed and where you have a multiplier. So the point I'm making and agreeing that we need infrastructure, but what type of infrastructure, what level of infrastructure, and we need good governance, because infrastructure has a lot of incentives for rent-seeking and corruption. So we, corruption is what has put us in this problem.
Okay.
That's the point we are making. And the antidote is deal with the corruption and prioritize the sectors that will put money, will create jobs and stimulate the economy and enable our revenue base to grow.
So as we wind down this discussion, I know the question Kenyans are asking is, the last 6 months haven't exactly gone as we had hoped. Many began the new year hoping for probably a cheaper cost of living and so forth.
Yes.
Dr. Muli, let me start with you. What might the next 6 months look like?
Now from where we are sitting, Waiga, the truth of the matter is the next 6 months are going to be worse. Because what
Give us some good news, Dr.
It's good to be real.
Parliament, hopefully.
It's good to be real in terms of these are the facts. These are the facts. You know why? For example, the region where I come from, and region like Northeastern, the rains have failed.
Correct.
The next time we expect to get rains in this country will be November. So the next harvest you are likely to see will be February next year. That will have covered more than 6 months. So what we are saying here, Waiga, is from a food security perspective, where the country and the new administration needs to prepare themselves on how they are going to secure Kenyans. Matters importation and foreign exchange are going even to get more worse, because as he has presented, the issue of fuel costs keeps on increasing. And anytime fuel costs go up, the spiral effect of that cost is all over. It affects industries, it affects transport, that is the public sector, it affects almost every other sector is affected. So you realize it's like not even tightening the belts. In economics, we say austerity measures. We have to engage austerity measures as a government if we have to really make Kenyans enjoy a better life. The other important point, which we are, COVID had almost like disappeared. Now you are seeing coming back of COVID, which means now, even from the health sector perspective, we have another problem we must address. We are all being now told, go back to masks. Very soon you will not be surprised to see us being told, go back now to your houses, which means more job losses. So we are saying, when you look at the future, from a practical analysis of what is happening, we don't see a very bright future. But God also plays miracles. You might
the miracle we're waiting for. Wanjiru, 6 months, what are you seeing?
Miracles.
Our call is that we need the truth. Kenyans need the truth about the situation. Government needs to get real and redirect resources to cushion.
The outgoing or the incoming?
The incoming one. The outgoing is already done with this stuff.
Well, this outgoing one played a game of just passing the buck, really kicking the can down the road. It was their duty, and we've been calling for this. Give us a serious economic rescue that looks at the immediate things. Who is most affected? Who do we cushion? Where do we redirect money so that you can keep the supply and demand without, release money from where it's not productive? We've been talking about the monetary policy and the exchange rate, and and it looks like this is going to happen anyway. The exchange rate is likely to deteriorate even more. Who's going to be most affected? How do you cushion them? Where are there reserves that can be drawn on? So we need tough decisions. We need clear decisions. We need realism. In fact, the 2021 PBO report was called Budget Realism, because what they were saying is that government is not being realistic. They are lying to Kenyans, lying to themselves, and the impact is higher taxation, higher cost, and inability to respond to these crises when they happen.
Dr. McPhee, as you have the last word, do you have any good news? Oh,
well,
you
see, the first thing is, I think we blame government for every thing that goes wrong in Kenya. In every company where I'm a director, we've had money stolen.
Private sector.
Mumia Sugar Company, if you actually look up sugar production in Kenya on Google, do it right now, and you'll see Mumias is the largest producer of sugar at 20%. In the last 3 years, Mumias has not produced 1 grain of sugar. Not 1 grain. That's the private sector. We have Nakumat, we have Uchumi, we have Athi River Mining, we've got Tuskies. You know, we can go on and on. So I think it's important to remember, unless we Kenyans change, we're going to destroy the country. And we've got to be realistic. You know, it's all very good talking about policies and you know, everything is an act of parliament and, you know, and policy. And you and I have to be honest. You and each one of our people watching this particular program, we got to change. We got to be honest. Because then, and number 2, we got to think about our fellow person in Kenya. I came here this evening, okay? I go around one of these U-turns, okay? A man can go into the left lane and overtake me there, but he sits behind me and flashes his lights as if, you know, I had committed some kind of a crime. Now, we don't think about one another in Kenya. We think, ni mimi tu, Kenya ni mimi.
Okay, but
Kenya ni mimi, mimi ni Kenya.
Aren't you being overly optimistic, hoping that everyone will become honest? I don't think everyone is honest in the US or in the UK or in Switzerland in 6 months.
I thank God I don't live in any of those whole countries, okay? So in this particular case, thank God I live in Kenya, okay? Because at least I can mention the word God and people don't get offended. You know? But the fact is, you know, we have to change, we Kenyans. And, you know, farming is a business. We talk, why isn't the government putting in money into farming? You've given us the reason why we don't have food at the moment. We've got bad rains. And our agriculture is rain-fed.
Your parting shot is calling for a response.
Yes, it is. Because government makes the regulation and they're the ones who have imposed themselves in all these spaces and are overbearing, frustrating agriculture.
And then we wrap up.
Now, Kenyans, and I'm talking to Kenyans, let's work on our value system. And it is very well captured in the Constitution. Let's start there. I don't know, we start class nursery, or we start at Form 1,
or start with our politicians.
You start with your family.
It must start somewhere.
I think that's where we wrap it up. Thank you to my guests, whether it's values or politicians or whatever it is. Nevertheless, some tough times ahead. We certainly hope it's going to get better. But here on the Monday Report, we endeavor to have shows like this where we can have these discussions, try and put the politics aside so that you can really understand what's going on. And I hope as my guest spoke that you got a rough idea really of where we are as a country, and it doesn't sound like a good space. But hopefully, as we have more conversations like these, solutions can come up. Let me thank each of my guests. Dr. Jim McPhee, a lecturer at Strathmore University. Thank you for your insights today. Wanjiro Gikonyo, National Coordinator at the Institute for Social Accountability. Thank you for joining us as well. Together with Dr. Makali Mulu, a member of the Budget Committee in the National Assembly. We'll see you soon, but this is where we wrap up for now. Thank you so much for having joined us for this broadcast. My sign language interpreter this evening has been Njoki Shege. On behalf of the whole team that's made this broadcast possible, thank you for tuning in. Have a good night, and we certainly hope for better days ahead. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.